I'm sure there's lots of questions because this is an interesting topic and lots of interesting things were just said, but I'm going to lead off with just a couple questions. The first, which Zach mentioned, and I think is one of the most interesting questions right now in the space is, and maybe the most confusing topic is, what do we mean when we say bot? And I think a lot of people talk about bots and talk about messaging, but bot means a lot of different things. So I'd love to hear from y'all what you think, how should we think about answering that question? I'm not necessarily what is a bot, but I'd love to hear like what y'all think about, like how should we reframe maybe that or help people understand what we're talking about when we're talking about bots? Is that even the right word?
I mean, it's such a loaded word. It's crazy. I just quickly, like there was this thing called Bot Summit last weekend in the UK that's like a popular thing lots of people heard about, and it was like all about like generative art bots on Twitter, had nothing to do with like services, information, or news, and it's like these people are extremely defensive about the word bot, and like whatever. But for what it's worth, I think it's basically services and information delivered via messaging and triggered with contextually by people talking.
That sounds pretty good. Who else?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think it's a overly generalized word because a lot of people sign up for Purple expecting it to be what they think in their mind is a bot, so not a human being on the other end, which is actually kind of fun for me because a lot of times people will text something and I'll respond back and be like, "Whoa, there's a real person over there," which is cool. It's like a cool moment, but I think that it's a lot more than just. I think a lot of people associate it with automation and with like an AI element, and I think it can be a lot more than that.
Yeah, we're a lot less than that.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah, or not really automated at all, or not really AI at all. Yeah, I think it helps to think about it as types of bots, and then there are a few like key distinctions. One is push versus pull. Are you initiating the conversation, or is the bot? One is human or programmatic. Did a human write it, or was the response auto-generated in some way? Another is linear branching or infinite possibility. God forbid someone try the last one. I can't even imagine. None are really. I mean, I think honestly for all the discussion of AI around bots, there isn't actually yet a good example of that, even among the famous automated assistants like Siri, which still have a pretty limited set of tasks that they can perform. And then that's the other big distinction. A bot that's performing a task versus a bot that's essentially just a different interface for the information that just maybe it's in the right place, as Ben was saying.
Anybody else want to take a stab at it? Alex? No, he's passing. So actually, Rebecca, you brought up something that I think is a really interesting point, and was somebody actually Stacey Marie Ishmael from BuzzFeed brought up on Twitter the other day, which I thought was a really fascinating question she asked, or sort of statement actually, which is that as we are building these news services on messaging platforms, and we're sort of building these agents or bots, and they're providing the news. One of the things that is interesting is that they don't carry a byline. And she said, you should demand to know who are behind these services. You should demand to know who are behind the bots. Like, who are the humans? Where's the accountability? So I'm curious, like, what do y'all think about that? Like, several of the, I mean, Rebecca, you sometimes like reach out and start like personal conversations, but on Quartz, there's not, anything like that. You brought, on the New York Times election bot, brought voices into it, but what do you think the responsibility is there of news organizations? How do you think that's going to evolve in terms of, where that came from? Like, who's responsible for it?
Yeah, I'll take a crack at that. I think it depends. I mean, the reason I was attracted to journalism in the first place is because I think, I kind of talked about at the beginning, but I think journalism plays such an important role in society and democracy because you can only have a democracy that works well if you have an informed electorate. So to me personally, the role of a news outlet, or the priority of a news outlet should always be to do that, to inform people. And my personal take on that was, okay, well, like, I'm gonna try and do that through conversation. And so I think kind of like, and you guys all touched upon this, it's kind of about like the service that you provide. And everyone does that differently, and I don't think there's really a right way to do that. I think, though, that these kind of platforms give us a more powerful tool to to accomplish that goal that I think is so important. But it is a huge shift. I mean, such a new area, and it does require a lot of resources, a lot of energy, and a lot of like focus on it, which is hard to do when, especially if you're a more established news organization and kind of like having to shift attention and focus. But yeah, no, I think it just kind of like is awesome because it provides a new set of tools to accomplish that.
I would just add that the approach that is emerging out of like Silicon Valley right now in terms of like application delivery and all of this is definitely a hybrid approach where, you triage the person with pre-written material to the furthest point you can get them, and then you hand off to a real person at some point. So I think that what you're doing is really interesting, and like the authorship question is really interesting and important. Like even when you're dealing with automated response software, somebody is writing that, and it is, as Zach said, it's like a literary form. Like it's not a new thing, but it's an old thing being applied to new problems, and people. This is not a skill that is being taught in computer science or design classes or journalism classes, like to put yourself in the shoes of the user and consider like two possible paths forward. Like it's not something that's coming from traditional software design or anything. So who is that voice? How does that voice evolve in like the day shift and the night shift or whatever? I think these are interesting questions that I don't have answers yet.
I don't actually know that this is like a huge new issue. I mean, if you imagine that, like, when the New York Times sends a tweet, you don't know who sent that. It's like someone on the social media team, on a Facebook post or whatever. So I think we've sort of already run into this issue of this like institutional voice that people end up having to have. Particularly when you thinking about the stuff that we were working on the Slack bot with these sort of like trying to automatically answer questions. It may well be that every different question had been answered by a different person, because the ideal is you would end up with this database that different people have like contributed to. And there's a level where it might almost be strange to sort of pin that on one person, because if the question was not interpreted correctly and then you send back that answer from that person, then the reader's going to think like, well, that person's an idiot. That's not the question I asked. When actually it's my fault because I programmed it wrong. So there's a level of like, I mean, if I was the person who was being bylined, I would be a little hesitant because I would think like, well, I don't actually know what context what I'm saying is going to be put in. But I think that also depends on every different application. I mean, like obviously Purple's completely different because it is Rebecca doing it. So
let's do questions.
Hello, I'm Diego from LifePost. This question is for Rebecca. You mentioned that you're trying to, or what Purple is a conversational platform, media platform. So just if you could tell us what you mean by that and where you see this going.
Yeah, absolutely. So by conversational media platform, I sort of look at it as all of the content we produce is formatted for a conversation. So I kind of write instead of sitting down and writing what would be a more traditional article, what I do is I kind of think about what I want to convey, what's the story I want to tell, and then how would I literally, like, how would I text that to a friend? How would I have that, how would I tell that story in a conversation? And then I kind of break it up into atomized bits of messages and kind of tie them together with keywords to convey that. And obviously like inserting my own voice into the story. So that's kind of what I mean by conversational media platform. And I say media platform because, we started with politics, partly because that's my own personal nerdy area of expertise, but also because, the election, such a good time to be covering this. Also because politics is an area that most of us know, is really important. We want to know what's going on, but sometimes, especially for probably this doesn't apply to people in this room, but for non-journalists and non-politics nerds, people kind of think politics can be boring or a little too wonky to dig into. So it's a really good topic to apply this kind of thing to, and like enthusiasm to trying to get people excited about it and pulling out the most interesting aspects of it. But I say media platform because this can be applied, this can go beyond politics. We actually did an experiment with March Madness recently in the sports area, which was really exciting for me because, just a side note, I went to UConn, so big basketball fan, and that was fun. So I think it applies to a lot of different verticals. Yeah.
That's awesome. Let's take another question. Bert, what's up?
Yo, hey Trey, hey everybody. Yeah, I wanted to ask Zach if there's a lot of hype about the Quartz app. Can you tell us any concrete metrics about downloads, how active people are? Do they open it every day? Do they click on notifications? Also, Rebecca, similar questions, like how much can you tell us about your metrics? And for all of you, as we think about bots and messaging, what are the metrics that you should look at, and what is good? Like what kind of things are you thinking about for how to measure how these things are doing?
Sure, I'll try to be as specific as I can. We've had hundreds of thousands of downloads. Retention's been surprisingly strong, just compared to what, for us, it's a gaming apps metrics is probably the most interesting relevant comparison. So gaming apps talk about D7 and D30 retention, so how many people are using it on their 30th day after their first day, and that was above where we were told to expect. The average daily active user of the app goes into it twice a day and uses it for 4 to 5 minutes. That's really interesting to us, and awesome to see that it's also not 8 times a day, because if you use the app and try it 8 times a day, you might be a little disappointed, honestly. And so to be a daily, twice a day habit of a large number of people, it would be a hugely successful endeavor for us, and kind of what we're looking at. The only other thing I say about that in terms of metrics is the really hard one. I think a lot of, I imagine breaking news in particular, of us would struggle with is if the notification is so good that you look at it and then you close your phone and have a satisfied experience. I don't exactly know how to measure that, but you would want to count that as a satisfied user. So that's one of, I think, a few, and I can't even imagine measuring SMS.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a really good question, by the way, because metrics is a really important part of this, but it's such a new type of engagement that I don't think anyone really knows. Like, it's the metrics that are important is kind of different for everyone. But we launched Purple in early November 2015. With 50 people, and we now have a few thousand users. The average user texts us 13 times a week. So, but we have users on the high end of engagement sending us upwards of 100 text messages a week. And because a lot of that is like we're actually engaging in conversation with them. The next sort of the metric I think that is most interesting that we're just now starting to measure, so I don't have really good numbers on that, is daily recurring active users. So how many if I send one text to Purple 5 days a week to our users, and I only send one text every day, it's up to you to kind of text the keywords and dig down into it. How many of those days do you get a message that you respond and go down a story? So that kind of tells me like how valuable is Purple to your life, and how engaging the stories are and interesting the stories are.
Great. Question over here.
Yeah, so many of these tools are such obviously great ideas for journalism, for engaging our audiences. I could anticipate like going back. My name is Dan Gilgoff. I'm with National Geographic, and I could imagine going back to headquarters and like chatting up the business side or the CEO about some of these ideas. And I know the question is going to be, and of course, like there it is, the key to success is meeting the users where they are, not making them come to you. So how do you monetize that, especially using these tools within like traditional, newsrooms?
Actually, I think, Zach, it'd be interesting to talk about how y'all came roaring out of the gate with ideas about how to make money.
Thanks for the plug.
Advertising.
Well, it helped. So there's huge disadvantages to doing your owned and operated app, which is basically getting the person to download it in the first place. One huge advantage is not having to deal with restrictions on monetizing it. So for Quartz, there are two ad units in the app. Then the most common one is the display unit. You see generally upon entering the app. That's like we attempt to be like it gets out of the way. It doesn't block your experience at all, but you can't miss it kind of ad. But a fairly straightforward one. The more interesting but scarier one is we have a conversational ad. So the first time you complete what we call a script, currently you get a sponsor message. And we limit it to once because if it's not going to be a fresh message each time, that would obviously get really annoying really quickly. But what's been interesting is that people, at least anecdotally, don't speak highly of that ad unit. The metrics on it are off the charts. We want to be really sensitive to that because that could be super awkward really quickly, like talking to a brand or like pretending that this is like an actual conversation, not an advertisement. But I mean, in a broader sense, it's really clear that brands are interested in this even more than we all are, and want to get in on the action. And so we'll see. I guess we're taking it a little hesitantly.
What does the message say, just quickly, from the brand message?
This app is brought to you by Mini. To learn more about the Mini Clubman, tap here. And then there's a photo of the car.
Yeah.
Just really quick, I think one of the really interesting and sort of new opportunities that these things afford is like the follow-up, the upsell, turn a single purchase into a subscription, right? Like there's a pretty explicit intent from the user if you buy something or engage the first time, and the bot can follow up the next day or just allow the person to say like if you want this again, just say go, right? And then all the person has to do is send that go message, and now they're engaging again. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there.
Ryan?
Hello, Ryan from Open News. I know with the Howdy system that you actually interact with the bot to kind of create the scripts that then are run as team meetings by the bot, and there's some variance in replies that you get. It's not precisely the same experience every time. And with the Quartz app, there's the little ... that's like, ooh, the bot is like typing its reply right now just for me. So I wonder if you can talk about like affordances. How do you give these bots personality, maybe a little bit of humanity, without hitting the uncanny valley that Alastair was talking about, where as the user, like, I can ask this question, but why can't I ask any of these other questions that I have?
We look at the interactive fiction a lot, with like games like Zork from the 70s and 80s, I guess, really. That showed a model where you sort of present the user with a finite list of choices and then try to disambiguate what they mean if they don't type exactly what you mean. I think Rebecca does a great job of that with Purple. Just like all caps words are things that you can say, and everything else is off topic. But I think, and one of the things that we think about is like, it's always the bot's fault if the person says something wrong or issues an inexact command. It's like our job to do a better job at understanding them, not the user's job to learn like a command line thing. So we always just try to steer them back towards the goal. And I think one of the key things is that to have a very solid idea of what your goal is for that user, and not to have 500 goals, but to have 2 or 3.
The typing indicator was the most controversial design choice of the app by far. Lots of people responded saying, like, come on, like, you just give me the damn headlines. Like, why should I have to wait for it? And don't tell anyone, but we fetch all the content right away when you get into the app, so it is totally artificial. What was really interesting is when we tested without that, just bang, bang, bang. there is such a thing as too fast, which is very different than web development. We're all used to, like, there's no such thing as too fast. You can only work to speed up the experience. I mean, I'm not saying we got that timing perfectly right. It's based on the length of the message, but it's there intentionally to add not just personality, but actually some rhythm to the conversation, et cetera.
We actually ran into this a little bit when we were testing out the Times election Slack bot as well. That some people sort of said there was this perception that they knew themselves was wrong. That if you get an immediate answer, then there wasn't really anything like complicated going on, and there wasn't really anything worthwhile going on. And so, like, if we added like a second delay, then it's sort of this interesting thing because people knew they were being irrational about it and they couldn't really explain it. But yeah, an immediate response is somehow like, oh, that's just a confirmation. That's just a, like, I read what you said or something, rather than I've thought about this and I've given you actual, like, a personalized response back.
So I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, thanks.
Fast.
I'm Liam from the Texas Tribune. I was wondering about, Ben, you mentioned conversational UI as being an exciting design constraint. And I was also wondering about sort of on the user end of that, the accessibility gains that you get and sort of how you see this as being helpful for non-technical people. So you guys are building Slack bots and things filled with emojis and sort of things that are maybe a little bit more familiar to more tech audiences. But how do you see this as being flattening for less tech-savvy people, and what platforms are better for that?
Alex?
I can give it a shot. Right. For the breaking news Slack bot, it's not too different between slash commands and asking a breaking news bot to follow this. I guess it depends on, I mean, based on the user, a person like me would be just fine. Like, if it was all just a Linux command line, I'd be super happy and just fine. But since this is going out to the public, it needed to be just as natural as possible. So when you ask breaking news, follow, or I went through a few other options. So, like, they don't have to say the word follow. They can say tell me about, or star, or alert me for whatever. And then even the topics can be fudged a little. And so it does its best to follow what the user meant to say, and tries its best not to bring back an error code.
I think there is going to be an interesting time ahead for Slack because they started with all these tech audiences, and now, as Ben said in his presentation, like, their user growth is going astronomically, which presumably means that there will be a lot of sort of less technically inclined people using it. And I think that's something that we need to look at a lot more because most of the people I talk to are also very, like, techie people. So it's interesting to think, and again, it sort of goes back to not knowing the context around the bot and what's going on in the room around you. I think there's going to be a lot of work to be done in that area.
Yeah, and I saw people tweeting earlier about my example of the code that fits in a tweet, and it's like obfuscated code that well, I can read, but like most people can't. Like right now, bot building is a slightly nerdy technical thing. You write your JavaScript code or whatever, but very, very soon there will be WordPress style blog bot authoring tools. I was at a meeting of bot entrepreneurs in San Francisco, and these people are like rolling their eyes as they say ugh, I'm making another bot authoring tool. Ugh. It's like 6 months ago this was like a crazy idea, and now it's like everybody's doing it. So I think the Photoshop of bots, the WordPress of bots, these things are coming in the next cycle, and it's going to be a lot more easy to craft these things and provide the opportunity to to non-technical people completely.
I think there's also a level of not underestimating people in the way that non-technical people have made Excel spreadsheets that I can't understand at all. So it's not that just because you don't have that specific skill doesn't mean, given the right tool, like Ben was saying, you wouldn't be able to make something really interesting.
So summary is there's a lot to figure out. There's a lot to learn. Thank you, everybody who on the panel for joining us. Hopefully this was excellent for y'all. I'm sure y'all have even more questions for him. So thank you.